The DGR Women's Caucus is honored to present this interview with Vajra Ma, author and ordained Dianic priestess of the women's mysteries. An essay by Vajra Ma appears in the anthology Female Erasure, What You Need to Know About Gender Politics, War on Women, the Female Sex, and Human Rights. Vajra Ma, it is wonderful to have you here.
Thank you.
Vajra Ma is the leading exponent of women's womb awakening in feminist spirituality, based in her work with women's subtle body knowing since the mid-1980s. She originated the devotional moving meditation, the tantric dance of feminine power. The core practice of her mystery school and priestess lineage, Women Mysteries of the Ancient Future Sisterhood. Vajra Ma is the author of From a Hidden Stream, The Natural Spiritual Authority of Woman, and is published in numerous anthologies, including Four Mothers of the Women's Spirituality Movement. She is an ordained Dianic priestess of the Women's Mysteries with Temple of Diana Incorporated. I found you in a very political work, Female Erasure. I would love to get started first with having a little bit of history about you and your work, and then kind of moving into understanding the intersections between spirituality and politics.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, I've been teaching this practice, the Tantric Dance of Feminine Power, since 1992. It's a meditation, a moving meditation that I developed through my work with women, through my own moving meditation work, and then working with the female body, and very much informed by the what we would call the women's spirituality movement or the goddess movement, the awakening of women to the history that we have on the planet of having been spiritual leaders, of having a whole different cosmology about the planet and about the relationships between women and men than we have today with the last 6,000 plus years of patriarchy, which is a societal construct of male domination, which is what we live in today. And most people don't know that we're living in a patriarchy and that there was anything different. And so that's the nature of my work. So I consider myself a feminist spirituality teacher, working mainly through direct knowledge through the body. I live in Southern Oregon. I teach in Southern California and in the Bay Area and in Seattle and Portland, up and down the West Coast here. Yeah.
I think our listeners that aren't familiar with this work would love to hear more about it.
Well, what it is it's based in the fact that the body it's a tantric practice. And when I'm talking about tantra, I'm not talking about neo-tantra, which a lot of people I think are familiar with, which is based on sex and intimacy skills. But real tantra, authentic tantra, has to do with consciousness, and it embraces the whole body, and the body as being like a portal, the senses being a portal to spiritual understanding, to understanding reality. Okay, being present in what is really here, and being whole, being part of the totality. And, of course, patriarchy is based in division of spirit and flesh. The flesh is evil and must be subdued, and the earth is just a thing that we use as a resource, and we plunder now. So the Tantric Dance of Feminine Power is a spontaneous, inner-accessed, moving meditation that activates the spiritual knowledge in the body. I know that it sounds like a lot of words or sounds sort of vague, but it's very tangible when you're experiencing it. We start by just in a standing position with eyes closed, and we feel down into the womb. The womb is an organ that can create life. There's an intelligence there. So we rest in the womb, and then we let the sense of pleasure, any pleasure, just the movement of the spine or the breath moving through the body, we let pleasure take us into various shapes. And those shapes, now the way a person could, just a regular person who hasn't done this, relate to is that if you slump down, you're going to feel kind of low and depressed. And if you perk up and you lift your chest and you smile, you have a different feeling in the body, and the body is actually chemically affected by that. So that's how a person can relate to the fact that if we move into shapes and we fully inhabit them, there's a biocircuitry that happens in the body that actually holds a frequency, like the frequency of depression if you're slumped down, or a frequency of feeling happier if you're lifted up. It holds a frequency, and in that frequency there is information. And you see when you see yoginis or temple walls, tantric temple walls, or even yoga, all those shapes are based on a biocircuitry in the body that has an effect on your consciousness and your awareness of reality. So it's a very simple meditation and a very difficult one because it's so exacting, and it is brings up all the stuff that's encoded in your body, if all the internalization, all the low self-esteem, all the whatever, but it also makes you feel the enormous power and beauty of the body as a calibrator of reality.
That a word that's coming into my mind that really is informing me right now is biophilic. Is this a intensely biophilic connecting practice of your very being and a affirmation of your body?
Absolutely. And it's like making love. Everybody knows you're making love. You can have a marvelous experience, or you can have a crummy one, but that there's something that the body does and knows and experiences that is beyond words, and making love is one of those glorious experiences. And it is, and you said biophilic. Patriarchy is profoundly biophobic. It hates life. And we're getting now into, we can segue into why my spiritual perspective is in this book. The book is edited by Ruth Barrett, who is a feminist spirituality teacher. She was my teacher back in the early 90s. And she trained me, and she also ordained me as a Dianic priestess back in the early 90s. And the relationship between the spiritual and the political is profound, because if we really look at it, the world view of a people, which is spiritual, what are we here for? What's our relationship to the earth? What's our relationship to each other? That's spiritual. That affects every single structure of a culture. And so we're in a culture, so spirituality trumps politics. It creates politics. And we're living in a patriarchal civilization which denigrates the body and the earth and woman, oppresses woman, to a degree that I don't think we even realize anymore, because it's so, quote-unquote normal. So a spiritual view of the body is exactly what is missing in the transgender, the gender politics and gender identity politics. There's a profound lack of respect for, you're in a body, your body's not wrong. And in gender identity politics, so many people struggling with their gender identity, is based on framing their body as wrong. I was born in the wrong body. I was born in the wrong body. Children as young as age 3 are saying, like a little boy will say, I'm really a girl. I'm in the wrong body. They're getting that from the culture, in that that little boy is attracted to girls' things. It's really based in stereotypes, and children are being diagnosed according to the stereotypes of feminine, masculine, male and female in our culture, which means little girls play with sparkly things and pink dresses and tutus and dolls, and boys play with trucks, etc. And so when a little boy is saying, I'm really a girl, he wants to play with the girls, he's probably gay, because the fact is, Jennifer, statistically it's been proven that 80% of the non-gender conforming children grow up to be either gay or lesbian, and the rest of the percentage grow up fine heterosexual. But they're never, in today's gender identity politics, the children are not allowed to discover that. They're being diagnosed even as young as 18 months, based on their preference for colors and toys, as trans, and they're being supported in that. And so actually, the transgender movement is profoundly homophobic. That's where I fit in, I think, with the spiritual, mainly respect for the body, and that the body is not wrong.
Thank you for those insights. You said something very interesting about the perceptions infusing the entire culture. Patriarchy as a system is based on domination. Your spiritual practice and your politics are about relationships.
Yes. Yeah, to give a picture, what I say in my essay, I give the picture of the tantric temple walls in this sandstone, life-size images of men and women. And the women, they're all nude, and the women, these are the temples in Khajuraho in India. And the women have large, full breasts, and their hips are slung out to one side. Everything's curvaceous, and they're just drenched in jewelry with headpieces and anklets and bracelets and armlets and necklaces, earrings. And the men look almost exactly like the women. Their hip is slung out to one side, their hips are not as full, their chests are flat and broad, and they're wearing the same kind of jewelry. And they might be in couples, they might be in explicit sexual intercourse, or the man might be just cupping the breast gently of the female. And they both have these beautifully carved, voluptuous lips and big doe eyes gazing at each other. And what you see there is a non-binary. There's no binary there like we have it in Western culture, very strong male-dominant, difference, the six-pack abs and the dominating stance, so those legs spread out. You have our men and women on those temple walls who look very feminine, and yet the men are still quite virile. And it's understood in Tantra that the virility of a male comes from Shakti, and Shakti is associated with the female force of creation, the life force. And so you have a unity there. You have a non-rigid binary that's authentic and not the false fluid gender fluidity that we're being sold as in the gender identity politics. So that says something to me. They're united in their love of the body, in their love of each other, and in the overall feminine, the wholeness of the feminine that unites them, because man comes from woman. We create him. And so he's a variation of the female. And in that, it's very common in many cultures for men to cross-dress, and women too, for them to want to be the other sex and to do the behaviors and tasks of the other sex. There's nothing wrong with that. But we have to make it into something like, well, then you have to change your body and, have a vaginoplasty or a penisplasty or whatever it's called, and make the body wrong instead of just giving true diversity and fluidity to people. Does that make sense?
That's very obviously countercultural to everything that we are indoctrinated into in Western thought. And as you said, patriarchy has been this cultural practice for so very long that I think that our listeners are going to be challenged by it in some ways. Not that it'll be alien to everyone, but this is a whole new way of thinking, totally different construct. And I think that's really good.
Yes, we start from the fact that we're not really that divided. And yet, at the same time, Jennifer, the female body has distinct powers that the male body does not. And that has been the basis of its reverence in the past. And then the goddess veneration for thousands and thousands of years before patriarchy. And in that veneration, there's a unity and an egalitarianism, because you're respecting the source of life and you share in it together as men and women. But you respect the woman for carrying the womb and bringing through life and having those particular capacities. And so you get unified rather than divided. And the other thing about the female body is that it's not just the womb, which is huge, but all of the chemicals, and not just the hormones, but, for instance, oxytocin, which lives in a woman's body after bonding in affection or breastfeeding or affection and making love, lives in the woman's body much longer, because testosterone in the male body kills it off almost immediately. And so there's so many layers to the wondrous capacity of the female body And that is being erased if you just blur the distinction of the sexes, and you say there's no such thing as male or female, which is what queer ideology states, and which is what gender identity laws are now based on. There's no such thing as a real division of male and female. And what the Department of Justice in the United States is trying to do, they tried to do in North Carolina in their lawsuit against North Carolina, is establish that if there's if somebody has a gender identity that's other than their natal sex, gender identity makes them that sex. In other words, any man who thinks he's a female is actually a female. And they're replacing sex with gender identity. They're obliterating sex as a category and saying gender identity trumps it all. Gender identity determines not if you're just a man or a woman by social construct, but whether or not you're male or female. Now, that's, to me, insanity.
What you're saying is completely circumvented by the laws that are being passed, that there's
Right.
fundamental reality here that can't exist within that construct or is wiping out women within the law. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. And what it's doing is it's replacing reality with concepts. And that's what patriarchy is. It's concepts. A concept that the body is separate from the spirit, that the mind is separate from the body, and that the body has to be subdued. That's the basic construct of patriarchy. And it is a construct, and it's not based in reality. And so, and what science has actually shown, Jennifer, is that very clearly that the body and mind are inseparable. It's a body-mind. We have thinking going on in the gut, and that's where we get our gut feelings, our sense of, oh, this is not right, or this is wonderful. It's a gut feeling. So there's a complexity of the body for all humans, and then there's a complexity that is distinctly female and should be respected. And this is being erased by gender identity laws. And it's also erasing women as a sex class, a class based on sex, through which we gained our rights and have fought so hard for our societal rights, the right to vote, for instance. And we cannot continue to organize and forward women's rights and liberation if we cannot define ourselves as a particular class. If we are forced to, as we are now in many places, allow men into, we cannot organize as a class of women for our rights if we are forced to allow men into all of our spaces, whether they're political or otherwise. And the reason, my direct experience with women is in working with ritual groups and sacred dance movement, drum and dance circles with only women, and also in mixed groups with women and men. A group of women has a collective consciousness that is different than a group where there are men present. And it is an extraordinary experience to experience women moving spontaneously in drum and movement and dance, and actually tapping into our ancient knowing, our shamanic knowing, our connection to life and to the other dimensions and to the earth itself. And that's a very real, tangible difference. And I can just convey that, extrapolate that out into the political, that women, well, they found that women, if there's 20% women in a governing body, a legislative body, the quality of the decisions changes. There's been research done on that. So there is a collective consciousness that women have, a collective consciousness that men are now severed from the human consciousness and this severed male ego consciousness that's running the planet, or running the world. But what we need to do is bring them together again. And we need the distinct groups of women only, and we need the groups of women, men and women together with a good percentage of women who are affecting the decisions and the policies and the politics.
I think that all of that you've shared today with our listeners is going to be cause for a lot of reflection and thought, and I am excited about your perspectives. Is there anything that you'd like to say in parting?
Just thank you so much, Jennifer. I would love to come to any place that women want to bring me to experience this directly in their own bodies. Thank you so much.
And it's been a pleasure talking with you. The DGR Women's Caucus thanks you for listening to this interview with Vajra Ma.